Joining us now, the national campaign manager for the now presumptive nominee, Donald J. Trump, for president campaign. We had him back on all the way back in May before Trump even announced. And I told him that he was going to be in for the ride of his life and they were going to be the nominee. And we believe they're going to go on to win and defeat Hillary Clinton. Corey Lewandowski, great to have you with us, man.
Hey, thanks for having me on, John. You have been just a stalwart, a great representative, a person who called this race from the very beginning, one of the very, very few people in the country who understood what Trump was about. So it's a pleasure to be on with you today.
Well, it's always good to have you, Corey, also, and we're excited about what is going on. Now, I predicted you were going to be the nominee. I've got that. Now I'm predicting you're going to win the general, and people call me all the time. They're like, how can he win? How can Trump win? Oh, he's down in the polls. Oh, it was unfavorables. It's very simple to me, which is this. All you have to do is win all of Romney's states. And if you look at the map, as I did the other day on the air, you're ahead big in all of those. You're going to win those. And then you just have to win 3 battleground states, Florida, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. And Corey, a new battleground poll just out today. You're in a statistical dead heat in Florida with Hillary Clinton. You're ahead in Ohio of 43-39, and you're dead even in Pennsylvania. And the campaign hasn't even started, and they spent hundreds and hundreds of $millions dollars on negative ads on Mr. Trump. Don't you think that's a pretty good sign?
Well, it's a great sign, obviously. And what we have said from day one is that Donald Trump is going to expand the map in this general election cycle. And if you look at the states that Mitt Romney won 4 years ago, and you're exactly right, those states are the states that have been safe Republican states for a long time. And we feel very good about those states. Now, that being said, it's not enough to win. And the goal here is to win the general election. But once you put Donald Trump in play, and you start looking at states like Pennsylvania, where we're going to do very well, in Ohio, where we're winning today, Florida, where at least in the primary cycle had a dominating performance there, beating a U.S. senator from Florida by more than 20 points. You start looking at that, and you see the coalition that we're putting together across the country, and you start putting states like Michigan in play and New York in play, and you take the Democrats and you make them spend their resources in places where they haven't normally had to do that. It is a recipe for success for the Republican Party come November. Further, we had the privilege of being in Oregon and Washington State over the weekend, and I can't tell you how amazing the people were out there in states that have, again, historically voted Democrat. We were up in the northwest part of the state of Washington where Mr. Trump had, 18,000 people show up at a rally. We did an event in the eastern part of the state where we had 16,000 people. We were in Eugene, Oregon, the western part of the state there. Another event with 14 or 15,000 people. The crowds are massive. The people are fired up. They want true leadership. They want a leader who is going to put our country back on track. And even in states that have traditionally been very blue in the terms of Democrat-Republican, we're seeing great turnout for Mr. Trump, and we think we can be competitive everywhere.
It's going to be very interesting, this race, no question. You're already taking it right to Mrs. Clinton. As I said, it hasn't even started. Now, let me just ask you point blank, Corey Lewandowski, can the Trump campaign win Virginia?
Oh, there's no question we can win Virginia. Look, it is a battleground state, but it's a state that we're going to compete very hard in. And with the help of you and so many others, and I think you're going to be our vice chair this year of our delegation from Virginia is what our hope is. I've endorsed your candidacy and your slate the last time I was on your show for the convention, and we look very much forward to having you with us in Cleveland. But the answer is we can win Virginia. And you know why we can win Virginia? Because the people of Virginia understand. So there's really two components of Virginia. You've got the people who live just outside the Beltway and commute into Washington, D.C. and rely on the federal government for their jobs. Then you've got the rest of Virginia. And what you have is you have people who, across the state, regardless of where they are, want to see a country that has less debt. They want to reduce the amount of money and the burden that we pass on to our children and our grandchildren. And so, that message resonates, whether you're a blue-collar worker, a white-collar worker, whether you work for the federal government or you work somewhere else. I think it's fair to say that people don't want to pass on more debt to their families and to their children. And so this is something that has been a pillar of our campaign, which is reducing our national deficit. It's very important to us. And the only person who has the ability to do that, because they've done it in the private sector and balance the budget, is Donald Trump. So that's something that's going to play for us very well. I think we need to renegotiate our terrible trade deals. There's no question about that. And we're going to make sure that when we have immigration come into the country, it is done legally. And so, when you start looking at those issues and understanding the general election makeup, Virginia is a state that is always competitive, but moreover, it's a state that understands if we don't start controlling our spending, we're going to end up in such fiscal disarray that there's no way that we can get out of it. And so I think the people of Virginia, and for that matter across the country, are looking for a chief executive officer of our country, a president who understands that and makes that their priority.
I think so. Corey, let's get to Speaker of the House Paul Ryan in kind of a shocker the other day, saying he's not comfortable with Donald Trump. He's not going to back him right now. Then Mr. Trump saying, well, I don't really want to back Paul Ryan's agenda. You guys have a meeting towards the end of this week. How is this whole thing going to play out?
Well, I think what you have with Donald Trump is you've got a candidate who's received more votes in the Republican primary process than any candidate in the history of our country. And we're, after tonight, with the elections in West Virginia and Nebraska, Mr. Trump will have received over 11 million votes, which is a historical number. And I think what that says is that the people of our country want to change. And what that means is, look, we need to find ways to work together with the Republican leadership, because should Mr. Trump have the privilege of serving as the President of the United States, you want to be able to work with the colleagues in the House and the Senate and find common ground. And I think one of those places where we'll find common ground is on deficit reduction and cutting taxes for the middle class and providing tax breaks and tax relief for businesses and reducing the onerous regulations that the federal government places on trying to start businesses. And I think those are areas where Donald Trump and Speaker Ryan and Leader McConnell can all get together and agree on. Now, are there some differences potentially moving forward? Of course there may be. Mm-hmm. But that's an opportunity to work together for the betterment of the country. And, whether it is done very quickly or it takes a little longer, what the goal here is to bring people together to make sure that we have the same vision, which is to make our country great again. Make America great again has been, the theme of this campaign. And the only way to be able to do that is by working with the elected officials in Washington and making sure the legislative agenda that we put forth is understood and that we work together to achieve it.
Now, Corey, there's a rumor going around that just hit in the last 24 hours that there's a movement underfoot at the convention to change the rules in such a way that might allow for still a parachute candidate to come in, even if Mr. Trump has over the 1237, by simply moving the number. That would be like moving the goalpost in a football field back after you're in the end zone. How are you guys reacting to these kind of rumors? And is there any basis to these?
Well, John, I think there's a lot of people out there who have finally come to the realization that Donald Trump is going to be the Republican nominee this cycle. I think some people took longer to get there, but now everyone realizes that we are here. And, this notion that we're going to have anybody else get into the race or a third party, it's ridiculous, because if you do that, what you're ultimately doing is not only are you handing the general election to Hillary Clinton if a person runs as a third party, but what you're really doing is you're taking the Supreme Court and you're granting her the privilege of 3, maybe 4, potentially even 5 Supreme Court justices over the next 8-year period to fundamentally change the direction of our country. And that's very concerning, because the people that she would be willing to appoint to the Supreme Court would be re-looking at a number of the most critical issues that face our country, not the least of which is the Second Amendment. Hillary Clinton does not believe the Second Amendment is something that the people have the right to keep and bear arms. She has a fundamental disconnect on that. Mm-hmm. And she would be appointing judges and justices who'd be re-looking at some of the cases which have been done in the past and potentially overturning or changing some previous Supreme Court rulings. And so, it's not just about the administrative part of things. It's about the long-term impact that federal judges have on our day-to-day lives. And if a third party were to get in this race, or they decide to move the goalposts, what you're going to see is a true backlash, and moreover, what you're going to see is people who are fed up with the system and probably don't come out and vote at all. So I don't think that's going to happen. Donald Trump is going to be the Republican nominee, and then moreover, we hope that he's going to be the president come November.
Well, the whole thing is not listening to the voters. I mean, a strong message has been sent. Donald Trump has received millions and millions of more votes in Republican primaries than anybody else. He's done that for a reason. And whether you want to say it's establishment or leadership, you've got to listen to the voters in your party that obviously have a different choice in mind, no question. I want to get, Corey, the minimum wage, which has been now a raging battle that's going on. And I'm in favor of an increase in the minimum wage. This is where I differ with some of my conservative listeners. And my argument is, if you don't believe that minimum wage should go up, then why do you even have it for a reason? Look, nobody can make it on $7.25 an hour. I think it should go up. Mr. Trump believes it should go up. How do you reconcile this argument where conservatives are saying, oh, that is so not within our economic philosophy?
Well, here's what he said. And remember, what we have in this country is we've got competing interests. And we've got states who are competing for jobs against other states and manufacturing. And what we've said is, look, the minimum wage, $7.25 an hour right now is the federal minimum wage. But that does not preclude any state from passing a state law which would increase that minimum wage. And we've seen states like California and others who have kicked around the idea of $15 an hour. And what we want to do is create a business climate where these states can have competition amongst themselves. We should not be competing with the minimum wage that we have against Bangladesh and Vietnam and all these other places that are trying to steal our jobs and sell our products back to ourselves, and we get nothing for it. So what we would like to see is competition amongst the states to allow them to choose what the minimum wage should be in their respective states, and then as they compete for businesses domestically, that's what we should be doing. We should allow the states to decide how much it is, because maybe $15 an hour in New York City is very different than $15 an hour in Mobile, Alabama.
Right.
So it should be a state-based decision, and I think there are some things, many things, where the federal government just does not belong, and this may be one of them.
I think so, but I think overall, generally, an increase in the minimum wage is warranted. $7.25 just is not enough. I think it should go up, so we're on the same page there. I want to get to the international scene. In his foreign policy speech a couple of weeks ago, Mr. Trump came under fire from the typical neoconservative set when he questioned the NATO alliance and the need to look at maybe changing it, revamping it, having countries pay their fair share, but just basically looking at the whole thing. He said it was antiquated, it was set up for something else. Now we've got a situation right now where I think those words were prophetic, where the government of Turkey, who is a NATO ally for good reason, is trying to get NATO to accept Cyprus. And here's why. Turkey has 37,000 troops occupying 1/3 of Cyprus. If they bring Cyprus into NATO, then rather than becoming occupiers, it's a NATO exercise. I mean, don't you think this whole thing is ridiculous?
I think the whole notion of NATO, and Mr. Trump has talked about this, needs to be relooked at, and the whole notion of the UN needs to be relooked at. And what we have is, we've got countries who don't pay their fair share anymore, that have relied on the U.S. to be the policeman of the world, that don't have the same interests we have, and moreover, these entities are not designed to go and terrorism, global jihadists. That's not what they're designed to do.
Right.
And so looking at the whole notion of a system which was established, long before I was born, and not having any significant changes to it, is the perspective of a new administration that could potentially look at this and say, is this still relevant? Do we still need this? What role are they playing? Are other countries there? And if not, what role does the United States need to play moving forward? So I think, putting someone in as the President of the United States to bring a fresh perspective to all of the things that our country has just taken for granted over the last 30 years. Well, we've always done it this way. Well, it doesn't mean it's right. And it doesn't mean it's the right thing for the country. So it's a great opportunity right now to reset what has been done in the past, to put a fresh set of eyes on it, to determine what is best for the United States first for a change. And what he said was, we are not going to go out and nation build. We're going to make sure our country is first. And it is fair to say that we should be proud to be Americans and we should put our country first.
Now, let's get to internal fundraising. There's a lot of people saying you're going to need $700, $800, $900 million, maybe $1 billion to run this campaign effectively against the Clinton machine. Obviously, that's an amount of money that Mr. Trump cannot continue to self-fund without selling off a lot of his assets. How do you put together a fundraising team to raise that money without losing Mr. Trump's key theme, which is independence from bundlers, Wall Street, that whole globalist funding network that so many other politicians are beholden to? How do you bridge that gap, still keep his fierce independence from the donor class?
Well, here's what we have said, right? Mr. Trump has said he's going to self-finance his campaign through the primary, which we are doing and continuing to do. He's put $40 million or more of his own money into this race so far, and we have done it more efficiently than every other campaign because we spent the least and gotten the best results. And I think we will take that mentality and bring it to a general election matchup. And so what that means is, maybe you need $800 or $900 million, but we're going to be much more efficient with the money. Moreover, what Donald Trump has said is, I'm going to raise money for the party, and I'm going to make sure that those candidates that are running for the U.S. Senate and Congress and the party-building apparatus are going to have the resources necessary to be successful. And, Mr. Trump has a net worth of north of $10 billion. That's billion, with a B. And so for anybody to think that they're going to come in and give the legal contribution to Mr. Trump, which is $2,700, and they're going to have an undue influence over this individual, just doesn't fundamentally understand how the system works. Because, Mr. Trump doesn't need money from lobbyists. He doesn't need money from special interests. He doesn't need to go and be beholden like all these other individuals have been. He's not looking for a job if if the election doesn't go his way, to go join a law firm and become a lobbyist afterwards. He doesn't need any of those things, and he's made the personal investment of his own capital to make sure that has always been the case. He's going to keep doing that, and what he has said was he's going to make sure the state parties and the national parties have the money necessary so that they can fund their ground operations. But that doesn't mean he's going to be beholden to special interests, because that will never happen. The only people he will be beholden to are the American people. Okay,
final question. Corey Lewandowski, National Campaign Manager for the Trump for President campaign. I got about 2 minutes. What is your message to our many listeners who were behind Senator Ted Cruz, obviously very down after his sudden withdrawal just a week ago from tonight, inviting them into the Trump campaign? Corey, what's your message to them specifically?
Look, we want to bring everybody together is what it comes down to. It's very simple, right? If the objective here amongst the Republican Party is to ensure that we do not have a Democrat in the White House for 4 or 8 more years, then we want all of the people who are supporting Ted Cruz to come over and support Donald Trump. If all the people who are supporting John Kasich and every other of the 15 candidates who are in this race who now know that Donald Trump is going to be the nominee, we want your help. We want your support. We want to make sure that we're all going in the same direction. And we saw an editorial in the page in the Wall Street Journal yesterday from Bobby Jindal. We've seen a number of people, including Rand Paul, who've come out and endorsed Donald Trump. Look, we have to be unified. If we're going to be successful, we need to be unified. And what we have seen over the course of the last 6 or 7 days is a number of people who were on a different side when it came to the Republican primary race, and now they're with Donald Trump because they understand that a Trump presidency will be so much better than a Clinton presidency, and they want to make sure that the country is better off. So anybody out there who is supporting another candidate, we would ask you, we want you to come and be part of the team. There's a lot of work to do here. We're going up against a machine that is unparalleled in Democratic Party politics. I mean, this is a machine on the Democrat side that's been building for 30 years. And they know how to win elections, and they do that very well. So we need all the resources and help possible. And anybody who's been on a different campaign, we'd love it if you'd come and join us now.
All right, that is going to be the final word. We want to thank National Donald Trump for President Campaign Manager Corey Lewandowski for being with us this evening. He'll also be, we'll have a message from him at our Trump Delegates Rally. That is on Thursday night. Don't forget, May 12th, 5 to 8 p.m., Wild Wing Cafe in Chesapeake. I'll be there. Our team will be there. My wife, Ann, Robert Ike. Please join us 5 to 8 p.m. Mr. Lewandowski, it's always an honor to have you on, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great day.